optimistic. My English is, I don't know. My Slovenian is also not perfect. So I'm somehow a migrant and so. Well, I must admit that I was quite surprised when you proposed this term of geopolitics. It also a little bit annoyed me because I thought that I thought that I came from the other side, from beyond of this term, and so I would like also to clarify my position, because I think that the geopolitics implies some kind of the objectivity. I'm not objective, I'm subjective even more, I'm militant. And of course, this objectivity, which is so common in our world, in our modern world, also in our academic world, is always based on the hidden presumptions, and this hidden presumption is, of course, also some structure of the power. And this objectivity, I made a small text years ago about epistemology of uprising, and so I'm very in my activist and militant experience. I was learning on the South, if I say, and I believe in the upside down world, and so this different epistemology is very near to that what was proposed by the Collectivo Situaciones from the Argentina, and which was broadly discussed then in intellectual circles and by the well-known names and so on and so on. So yes, and I've already changed some of my ideas, which I propose. I think it is so-and-so the idea of this meeting. Yesterday I was listening to the Boris presentation, and this logic of alignment and de-alignment, realignment, and stepping out of the history and alignment with some real values and so on. For me, it means some kind of the process of no, it's not process. It's anti-process. It's you just find yourself there on the other side, like this teleportation in the science fiction movies. And this is therefore this means the stepping out of the history, and of course the four is old guy Hegel, so important today. But from my perspective, we need some kind of new rehistorialization. Of course, a different notion of history, because we need this process of hope, and this process of hope means a movement of people. This movement of people means overcoming the borders, and not only overcoming of the borders, but even tearing down the borders. So in this sense, I don't want to talk, for instance, today about the crisis, about a refugee crisis, of a migrant crisis. For me, this is something like exodus, really. maybe even in this biblical sense. I never read Bible, so I don't know if it is true. So I have this problem with this, as I've told, with this idea of geopolitics. So because it implies some kind of making with the ruler, making the borders, and this is also in core of the contemporary problematics and so on and so on. They're so nice and fancy, these straight lines, but these straight lines, they are producing all this violence and so on and so on. Well, I have a problem with microphone, technically. It's too close to me. I don't know. I think I've read, I better read something, and maybe I'll come to something new. Is it some new ideas? I have time, I think. Geopolitics is, I think, it crystallized itself in the times of imperialism on the break of the 19th and to the 20th century. And the colonial hegemony over the vast, unruled or unmodernized geographies has been the driving ideological and practical force behind the Western national states, which shaped then this idea of geopolitics and, of course, the practice of subordination of outer space, and then these inner conflicts, the Great War and so on and so on. Internationality is therefore a result of this historical hegemonic restructuring. Therefore, the periphery and the outer space, like the Central European space, our space, comprehends this internationality mainly as inter-ethnicity, and including, basing on the romantic post-1848 revolutionary counter-hegemonism of small nations like ours is. But today these ideas are more or less they are basing on the idea of Volksgemeinschaft, or idea of people's community. Therefore, they are very, very reactionary and nationalistic, as we've heard Boris, as we can see in Hungary, and as we experienced here in Slovenia last 20 years. But today, I see here a problem. Today, a century later, we are witnessing the formation of a globalized web of elusive hegemonic power, which consists of vast global fluxes of capital. The capital here has to be understood as the form of subordination and not just in strict economic sense. Because of the falling profit rate and the threat of the crisis, the capital flux embodies itself mainly as a evasive flux of financialization. The role of the national state differs in as much that we can talk about the end of nation states and the constitution of some other types of sovereignty. It does not mean that this eccentric and uncatchable force is not internationally or informally institutionalized, or that the national state already perished. It only changed its nature. All these changes have been fostered and accompanied by the new ideological belief we are calling now neoliberalism. Contrary to the common image, it is not an economic theory which could adapt to the argumentative or empirical processes. It is moreover a kind of the new religious dogmata which was adopted by the ruling elites. It means that the resistance and the processes of emancipation had and have to change their terrain and modes of action. They have to globalize, not in the sense of internationality, but in the sense of transnationality. But which are these new emancipatory subjectivists capable to confront the geopolitics of evasive capitalism? We can identify them at least from the end of the 90s in the new as-a-rule grassroots social movements. Contrary from the beginnings of the 20th century, these movements are not and should not be hierarchical and authoritarian or aiming to conquer the state apparatus to rule and change the society from above. I think we can see now we can saw this summer on the case of Syriza. And the hope, this blind hope that they can change anything. They are just, they even do not need to be an organization. They are just multiplicity of initiatives and struggles. Initially, they emerge from live world and have commonly anti-systemic connotations. Be it the identity policy or class struggle, environmentalism or free movement of migrants and refugees, peace politics or sustainable economy, they all constitute a non-hierarchical conglomerate of the contemporary global resistance. We can grasp it through Adorno's micrological thought, which prevents dialectical reconciliation in the totality. In his negative dialectics, the reconciliation is mediation on the no longer hostile multiplicity. We can refer to the Negris and the Hart's notion of multitude. We can be anarchists. We can go to Chiapas or Rojava to educate ourselves. There are even more possibilities to understand this heterogeneous emancipatory multiplicity and limitless possibility to actively join up and to reborn the hope and historicity which I identify somehow. After 2 decades of global resistance, frequently the question pops up about its impacts. We hear this very, what was from the Occupy movement, was it successful or not, and so on and so on. Through the mainstream media, but also through the numerous defeats, it seems that the global neoliberal rule is invincible. Within the life world, even the defeat should become a valuable experience. But the forms and pace of resistance is even faster than the rule of postmodern capital. We have to establish the networks on the internet, but also in the real life. For instance, like it is Via Campesina, one of the biggest network of the peasant grassroots organizations. It is the biggest organization today. Are Brazilian peasant without cimetiera, no? Without landless workers from the movement in Brazil. There's a huge networks and huge movements. We don't know much about them. I'm afraid. From altered globalization protests to the world and local social forums, from Occupy movements to the anti-austerity movements, all this resistance consists of this vivid heterogeneous subjectivities, initiatives and topics. This is the life experience which counts and persists in spite of violent systemic pressure. The exodus prevails in spite of death and the suffering. Still, there are open questions also within these movements of resistance. Do we need to constitute also an alternative or parallel structure? are a structured counterpower or non-hegemonic provisional hierarchy, are non-formal networks immune to the informal hierarchies and egotisms? Is it possible to formulate a minimal common platform? How to neutralize the national state-oriented leftists, traditional parties, which were imposing themselves in social forums and anti-austerity movements? How to confront the hijacking of our actions and its media? What's the role of self-defense, the limits of non-violence? The micropolitics of global resistance not just confronts, in my opinion, but also transcends the seemingly homogeneous neoliberal block of contemporary geopolitics.